Now, like I have already announced to you, we are looking at very critical matters. We are hosting, as Ghana, we are hosting the UN's Ebola Emergency Response Center. There's not been one Ebola case in Ghana. In Liberia, it might appear they need that headquarters most. What is it doing in Ghana, and do we stand to benefit in any way? We will find out about that in the first segment of the show, and then when we return, we'll deal with the rest of the vexed matters regarding what people like to call plain thievery of the states, coffers, rape of the nation by officials we trust to do the best and protect everybody else. You're welcome. Once again, your views and comments are welcome. The show is brought to you by Bank of Africa, as strong as a group and close as a partner. It's also brought to you by Star Assurance, Star Travel Policy from Star Assurance. That's Star, your solid partner. And MTN, welcome to the new world. MTN, everywhere you go. Sasso Spray, Kumantuntum Preko, Wemplex 400. That is your one-stop dewormer for the whole family. And of course, new kid on the block is the Garden City University College. You'll be learning more about them in the course of the show. Now, I have Abdul Malik Kubako Jr. in the studio. I also have Niama Akonfra in the studio. I'll properly introduce all of them subsequently. But the first segment of this show is to do with Ebola, and who best could we have had for that discussion? Victor Bampo. He is Dr. Victor Bampo is the Deputy Health Minister. Good morning and welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Samson. I'm very delighted to be here.
Great to have you.
Yes.
Good. Now, we just zoom straight into what this discussion is all about. A lot of people want to know a lot more about the state's response is to this particular threat. Now, we know that even the United States is at risk. And Ebola has killed, we are told by the UN, over 3,000 people so far. And this is only in West Africa. The thing is that I'm looking at certain records. And in Liberia, we are told that 5 people get infected every hour in Liberia. 765 new cases were recorded just last week, according to the Save the Children. That is an international charity. They say that Ebola in that country is spreading across Sierra Leone at a terrifying rate, quote unquote, terrifying rate. The number of new cases double every week. There's a place they call Nimba County. At the Nimba County, which is one of the worst hit outside of the capital, it has only one ambulance, and that ambulance is often broken down. My question is, what a perfect place to have this headquarters than Accra. Accra is obviously a wrong place, isn't it?
Well, let me step back come back one step and contribute to what you talked about. So yes, before this epidemic, Ebola started in 1976 in what is now the Democratic Republic of Congo. At that time it was Zaire, in a place called Yambuku, near a river called the River Ebola, where it got its name from. And up until this current epidemic, it had happened maybe 13, 14 times, and less than 1,500 people have died. And like you rightly said, the West African Ebola epidemic just took everybody by surprise. It started in a little village called Meliandu in Guinea, and because that is where three countries converge, Sierra Leone, Guinea, and Liberia, it quickly spread. At first, they thought it was cholera, until some gentleman who works for Médecins Sans Frontières recognized that there was one common thread. Everybody was having hiccups. And then he connected it to something that he had learned of before. And then they realized it was Ebola. By the time they saw it, it had spread very, very widely. And because of the weak post-conflict health systems in Liberia and Sierra Leone, it got a little bit out of hand.
Right.
So this is where we are. Now, you know that there's a second stage where, because of travel, it's gone to Senegal, it's gone to Nigeria now, it's gone to the
We'll
the
get
US.
into all of that
Yes.
bits and the scare that this country has also had to be put through, because we know that so far the Noguchi Memorial Institute has so far tested 98, and thankfully all of them have proved negative. But my question again is, in Liberia, and we are being told that between 1,000 and 2,000 international health workers are needed. Where are they needed? I think they are needed more in Liberia than they are needed in Ghana. In fact, they are not needed in Ghana. They are supposed to be at the war front. We are told that close to 3,000 treatment beds are needed. Where are these needed? They are needed where the people are infected. So why are we having the headquarters here?
Okay, let me go back. Let me go to your question directly. So just a little bit of history. I mean, the UN Security Council passed a resolution which was voted for by 134 countries, which is the largest number of people voting for, or countries voting for one resolution in history, you know, which said that Ebola is a threat to peace and security. The General Assembly then asked that this UNMIA be created. The reason why it is in Ghana is, first of all, the political commitment from His Excellency the President to help our neighboring countries. He's the President of ECOWAS as well. Secondly, it's because relatively the systems in Ghana work, and they need a launch pad from where they can then support these other countries. So what they're essentially doing is they have 250 people, 100 will be in Ghana who will provide the backup, and then 150 will be at the front. But Ghana offers a very good hub, you know, airlines coming in, you know, there'll be cargoes shifted and so on. And indeed, I think that one of the very senior UN people wanted this to be in Dakar. I've heard reports, but then comparatively, they thought that Ghana would be a better place from which to launch this.
You may have heard ordinary people and even some members of parliament, you know, express some, you know, misgivings about all of this. And we are also reading that the Oxford University has done a study and says Ghana is at risk of Ebola exposure. But this one particularly about, you know, animal infection, animal to human infection. So bringing this center to Ghana, does it not add up to the exposure?
Not at all. I mean, theoretically, because they will be going to the affected countries and coming back, you know, then theoretically there may be a risk. But if you listen to Tony Banbury, who is the head of the UNMIA.
The mission.
Yes, the mission. He talked about the fact that he wants to ensure that their protocols are stepped up even more. He said when he came in country, he was screened. But he wants to ensure that the protocols are stepped up even more. So the last thing that they want to do would be to introduce to a new country something that is not here before. If you look at their objectives, they have 5 objectives, which they call the STEP, S-T-E-P-P. And the last is to prevent new infections, you know, in countries that are currently unaffected. And, you know, being the UN, having the World Health Organization and other agencies there, I'm very sure that rather than bringing something foreign, you know, like Ebola in here, we probably will benefit from their being here. You know, there'll be technology transfer, we'll gain some knowledge, so that eventually, if ever we have to fight Ebola, we'll be more prepared than ever.
We'll have quick access.
Exactly.
Because this is supposed to be a logistics base.
Exactly.
And so that's the advantage we stand to gain.
Exactly.
But the risk involved is also a very high one.
It is a potential risk that has been mitigated. Like I said, you know, we ourselves have not been sitting idle. We have a 3-pillar response, the first is public education. The second is securing our borders, you know, with active surveillance in the communities and with the borders. And the third is getting ready for case management. Yesterday, my minister, Dr. Kweku Agyeman-Mensah, and the chief of staff paid a visit to the Tema Treatment Center, which is a state-of-the-art center to deal with Ebola. I think a couple of days before, my minister also was doing some distribution of personal protective equipment. I contrast that to a few months ago when we first came, and, you know, even at the airport there was no infrared thermometer and so on. They were just taking the details of people on paper, and things have changed. We've moved very rapidly to make sure that if Ebola is coming, we'll be ready to, first of all, that it should not come, and if it does come, we'll be ready to deal with it.
Have things changed so much so that the health professionals, individuals, including even the health service, that, you know, gave out a little warning that the GMA suggested earlier that they were not ready for this. And there were doctors who were very clear about it, that, look, we are not ready to take any risk if there was any suspected case of Ebola. Have things improved so much so that these fears have been done away with? I
think to a reasonable extent, yes. You see, it's nobody wants to put him or herself, deliberately in harm's way. So I guess that even in the countries that are affected, the health professionals are, having challenges dealing with it, because there are two groups of people who are at risk of getting Ebola. The first are the caregivers, of the people who are affected, and the second are health workers. And we are working with the GMA. Dr. Pokweduse and his colleagues are in constant touch with us at the Ministry of Health. We are working with other professional bodies to see how we continuously raise the bar with trainings, with sensitization, with incentives to make sure that if we have Ebola, we have a core group of people who can deal with it. As I speak now, in all the regions, there are regional teams that if there are any issues with Ebola, they would go to the forefront and deal with it. And the Minister of Health has issued a directive to the different levels of the health institutions. So they all know what to do when there is a case. And like I said yesterday, the Tema Treatment Center, I wish you were there. It's a really good center that if we ever have any issues, we can use to deal with Ebola.
You talk about a fine three-pillar approach. The education to the general public, also the surveillance at the various borders, and also the readiness, getting the medical professionals ready. Can you say that our level of readiness is as much as we see or hear about in Nigeria? It took only one person to infect that country, but they have done what we can say now is a successful control.
And I do agree with you. You see, we have to recalibrate what we mean by success. Ebola is all around us in some of the countries, So what do we mean by success? Nigeria, if they were using preparedness or going through their borders as a level of success, they would have said, quote unquote, that they had failed. But look at how beautifully they dealt with the incident, So for me, I give them 100% in terms of incident management. So what I'm trying to say is that we are very prepared and trying to make sure that Ebola does not slip through the borders or does not come into the country. However, in the unlikely event that it comes, then we are also very prepared to make sure that we deal with the incidents of Ebola. Having said that, you can never be fully prepared. Next week is full of trainings for health workers. I myself and others will be involved in some training that some of our development partners like the US CDC and WHO are organizing. So we continuously aspire to get better. And you cannot say, as they say, the proof of the pudding is in the eating. If we were to, in the unlikely event that we will get a case, then you can then come back and do a post-mortem on it. But we know that we are prepared and we continue to get even more prepared.
Doc, you're saying here and now that the clinic or health post in the remotest part of Ghana is ready to take care of an Ebola suspect?
I'm saying that they know what to do. And so we are hoping that when the system is tested, they will. And I'll give you an example. The Minister of Health issued a directive to all, I told you about, to all health facilities. It's very simple, and I'll paraphrase it. It says that if there are any health facilities with inpatient facilities, they should create a holding place, no matter what size of facility it is. Then regional directors of health, deputy directors of clinical care, deputy directors of public health have been asked to give their numbers to all health facilities within their jurisdiction, together with the district directors of healthcare. Now, if you don't have an inpatient facility, then you call the nearest facility that has an inpatient facility where they would have created a holding area. Now, all regional health facilities are also supposed to create isolation facilities. So it goes from the holding facility to the isolation facility. If you have doubts about how to manage a suspected case, you call in help from the next level up. And it's very clear what has to be done, whether it's private or public health institution. So like I said, we continuously provide the guidance, we continuously provide the training, and we hope that if we're ever to have a case, then we'll be able to deal with it. However, the most important thing is that, as you said in your intro, 100 people or 100 suspected cases have been dealt with by Noguchi. For me, that is the mark of a working health system. That somebody noticed that they had some symptoms and that, you know, they were called in, blood samples were taken, were brought to Noguchi. Fortunately, up until now, they've been negative.
And the other thing about that is that no matter which part of the country it happened, the samples had to be brought to Accra, to Noguchi. That's certainly not the best.
No, it's not. For me, that's not a problem in itself. That's one of our centers of excellence. Across the country, we have reference laboratories that if potentially we were to do these tests, we can do it. So it's just because Noguchi is our center of excellence, which is actually a regional center of excellence. So for me, rather than look at it in a negative light, it's actually something that is positive.
Did you say across the country there are facilities that will be able to do what Noguchi is doing?
Absolutely. Especially doing this PCR test for Ebola, yes. There are reference labs in some of the regional...
like where?
In Kumasi, in Sunyani, in Tamale, you know, and there are labs that can do... It's a relatively...
So are you saying you expect that henceforth the suspected cases will not be brought to Accra?
No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that at the current time, this is the protocol, that the blood samples will be brought to Accra for the test to be done.
And when they are brought to Accra, it takes a number of days?
Not at all. You see, we're working in a multi-sectoral way. I didn't talk about the institutional arrangements that have gone to put this protocol in place, but there's an interministerial team which consists of the Minister for Health, who chairs this team. The Chief of Staff occasionally chairs it because of the seriousness that government has given to this. But it has people from Ministry of Defense. I sit with my colleagues from Ministry of Defense and other places. And there are many times where samples have actually been brought to Accra by the Air Force, where, you know, it's all hands on deck. Everybody is doing their bit to make sure that things work well.
Right. It's refreshing to hear that, you know, after hearing your minister give what sounded like a prophecy that Ghana will never see any Ebola case, concretely on the ground, something is being done. So once again, what's your assurance to the Ghanaian public? And I'm not too sure how you feel that the education is going down, because it appears people don't seem bothered and they don't show signs that they are aware that they are at the risk of catching Ebola.
I would beg to disagree. I think that people are actually very tuned into Ebola. They know the symptoms, they know what to do. You know, I've interacted with people on many occasions where they actually, the level of knowledge is quite high. The challenge is that because
people are shaking hands and hugging all over the place.
Well, but at the same time, you find many people who have the sanitizers, people go and wash their hands and so on. So the knowledge base is high. The challenge is that because we don't have an active case, and we pray that we never have an active case, you know, sometimes the attention span is a bit low, you know, it's short.
Right.
And that's why we have to continuously put the education back in so that the level of awareness continues to be high.
Right. Now, back to the Emergency Response Center in Accra. We have been joined by Gabi Asare-Rocko, and he'll be part of the next panel that will deal with the other matters that we have to deal with. Welcome to the show, Gabi. Great. Now, Doc, back to the Emergency Response Center. So, has it started work? What is it going to do? Is it from here in Accra that the beds that are needed in Sierra Leone will be taken? Is it from here in Accra that the over almost 300 or 1,000 health workers that are needed will assemble and then move to Sierra Leone, Guinea, wherever?
I think there are others in government who are better placed than me, who work more closely with this team. For example, Dr. Omane Boama has been at the forefront of dealing, and he's been wonderful actually in the whole Ebola response, I must say. But what I know is that because here it's going to be a very light touch headquarters, you know, they'll be doing most of their work in the affected countries. But I would expect that this would be the launch pad where, you know, supplies would come in and it would be moved. At this present time, we've not had, at least at Health, we've not had in-depth discussions with them. We want to offer our support, and I think from His Excellency right down to everybody, we've been told to make sure that we provide as much support as we can. But as soon as the plans get clearer, because Tony Banbury himself, I think he's been away, he's been in the affected countries, and with his staff we will discuss how to put things together and what kind of support that we can give to them and how they would operate.
If I were hearing about Ebola for the first time today, and I had the opportunity of meeting you, and I ask you, what am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to expect? What would you tell me?
I would say have your wits about you. Practice high levels of personal hygiene. Make sure that as much as possible you wash your hands, use sanitizers if you cannot wash your hands. Keep your wits about you. If you see somebody exhibiting the symptoms that we've put out there, then make sure that you don't go too close to the person. Make sure that you report it, so that is dealt with, and listen out for any kinds of news and information about if there are cases and so on. As much as possible, we're trying to discourage large groups of crowds meeting. We're also trying to make sure that we monitor the borders so that people who are ill don't get in. But by and large, that's it. Just make sure that you...
And in the end, I have assurance that my country, my state, is ready to protect me when anything of the sort happens.
I would say so, and I think that we're working round the clock to make sure that, citizens of this country are well protected, even if there are cases that we deal with it very, very well. And this is, from the highest levels of government to the Ministry of Health, my minister and everybody else working, the technical people who are actually at the forefront, the health workers, doing as much as they can.
And we are told to wash our hands with running water. Too bad, the taps don't run in a lot of places. But
can I respond to that very quickly? Because I think that's one of the things that I hear very often. There are things, I don't know whether you've heard of the Veronica buckets, where water is put in this bucket. And it's running water. I can even hold up a cup for you and, pour the water over your hand. So
okay, so that's it. That's an intelligent one. Now, before you go, we'd like to talk briefly also about cholera, because we know that cholera is also wreaking havoc on Ghanaians. And that's where people ask the question, if even cholera is killing Ghanaians, then when it does touch wood, that Ebola, surfaces in this country, then we're dead. We're told that so far there have been as many as 17,000 reported cases. But I say that even if one individual dies out of that, that is bad. We have 150 deaths as a result.
I think, Samson, it's very unfortunate that we've, like you said, even if one person dies, that's really, really unfortunate. A little bit of history, cholera first came to Ghana in 1970-71, and it caused as much havoc as Ebola is causing now because it was a new disease. And we have this cyclical nature of cholera, where every few years we have some cholera. The good news with this outbreak is that the cases are coming down very rapidly. It shouldn't have been there in the first place, but as with Ebola, at the very highest levels of government, right down to the agencies that have to deal with the effects of cholera, we are making sure that things get much better. I brought this graph actually for you to see where things are at. So from a high of about 2,000 and a little bit cases of cholera every week, we've come down very much. We're hitting maybe the 700, 500 mark. And we're hoping that in the next few weeks we would have no cases of cholera at all. Because I do agree with you, we shouldn't be having cholera. But we are working very hard, also in an interministerial manner, with local government, with Ministry of Water Resources, with NADMO, Ministry of Health and so on, to make sure that we deal with cholera.
And we hear that this particular outbreak is worst in 30 years, because the last time we had any such with a staggering numbers like we have now was in 1982. And I asked myself how we have retrogressed. I
don't want to, to sound defensive. We're doing a lot about it. But you must remember that in 1982, 1983, the population of Ghana was about 12, 13 million. Now we're 27 million. So if you actually do the numbers, then, the 1983 one was worse. But however, the end of the day, I would like it that maybe next year, if you were to invite me to your forum, we wouldn't even be talking about cholera. And that is the objective we have now, that we knock it out of the ballpark and we make sure that it never comes back.
It's a shame, though, that it takes such needless death to get city authorities to begin to do the things that they are paid to do, and now we are being told that the authorities are ensuring that our gutters are getting cleaned and they are getting our president into the gutter. Very unfortunate situation. The vice president going all around and making sure that garbage is taken away. I have a friend who says he hates the sight of those photographs where people at the level of the presidency are getting down into the gutter. We are told us that the Ghana Health Service is now also running to ban food vending outlets at places where they ought not to have been there, and those who are not certified they are doing so and ought to have, should have done all of this. But are you, is there a synergy with your ministry to ensure that these bans that we are told do not remain just rhetoric?
First of all, I think it's unfortunate if you think that His Excellency the President, if you think that that was not big. I think it's a sign of leading from the front. One of the major...
No, if I were the president, I sack whoever I put there to ensure that that doesn't, start in the first place.
Well, that's his prerogative.
Right.
But you see, there's more than enough blame to go around when it comes to cholera. And yes, environmental sanitation, personal hygiene, but there's also an issue of attitudes that we need to deal with. And collectively, we all have to play our part. And I'll give you an example. I went to Adabraka Polyclinic, where I learned that a young gentleman, 20 years old, who had been brought in the day before with cholera, started getting better because he had been given fluids. One went home, indulged in the same practices that got him cholera in the first place, and came back dead. I was there at Adabraka Polyclinic, went to make some donation of some items to the polyclinic. And right in front of the cholera ward, there were 4 women who still had their drips, up their veins, and they had called the wache seller, and right in front there, they were eating the wache. So I'm not saying that it's entirely their fault, but together, collectively, we must, we must work to make sure that this thing is beaten. You talked about, is there synergy? Yes, I talked about an interministerial group. And like I said, it consists of, local government, water resources, NADMO, communication, which is a very important part, and health. And sometimes we co-opt development partners and so on. And there are 4 key areas that we're working on: communication, water and sanitation, case management, and food hygiene. I wish there were time, I would have gone into each of them, but those are the broad areas. And we meet every day. For example, yesterday we were at the Flagstaff House, briefing the Chief of Staff and Deputy Chief of Staff, and we've been tasked to take things even further. So we are working very, very hard to ensure that this cholera goes away and it never comes back. It
never comes back. How assuring is that? And thank you very much, Dr. Victor Bampu, for coming into the studios. My guest, panelists, if you have any questions to him, you can throw it at him quickly before he leaves. If you have any question regarding Ebola or cholera that you want him to address. Okay. Thank you very much. Once again, good to have you on the show.
Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you very much. We take a break here. We'll be right back.